Chapter 3. Fire in Corna. The first thing I noticed was the fire. The livery was fully engulfed in flames, as was the blacksmith's shop. People were running back and forth through the muddy streets, yelling and screaming to each other. Smoke was billowing up over the rooftops, and the heat could be felt from a great distance. I know that the spiritual teachers in our village talked about hell, and although I didn't know what it was like, if I had to describe it, I would say that it looked like Corna at the moment. After a quick and shocked glance at each other, Cam and I dashed forward to try and give whatever help we could. It was obvious that the livery and the blacksmith's shop were beyond saving, but great effort was being put forth to save the one-room schoolhouse and the market. Cam and I had no time to think about our recent activities in Kofar. Our whole focus was spent on trying to save the village from catastrophic disaster. It was dark before the fire was under control. Most of the men in town had been out helping to fight the fire, and now we were all tired, dirty, and as shocked as we were when we first discovered the flames. "How did this happen?" asked Penn, who was the butcher and taxidermist in Corna. His shop was several streets away and out of the fire's dangerous attack. No one had an answer. From what could be gathered, Stockton, the livery boy, smelled the smoke shortly after he arrived to muck out the stables and fill up the feed bins for the horses. Within moments of his warning cry, the back of the stable was ablaze and spreading quickly to the other parts of the barn and the surrounding buildings. Stockton, along with the help of a few others, got the horses out in time, but the fire in the livery quickly became unmanageable. From there the fire spread hungrily. If not for the hard work and determination of the townsfolk, things would have been much, much worse. A few other buildings had suffered damage, but nothing that couldn't be repaired. No one was hurt, and that had been the main concern on everyone's mind. As I surveyed the damaged village, I had an uneasy feeling in my gut. Did this have anything to do with what happened in the Maples the week before? There was no reason to think that the two events were connected, but I couldn't shake the feeling that they were. I saw Cam coming towards me, covered in dirt and sweat, but free from injury. "Wow, that could have been a lot worse," he stated. We looked at each other. It was as if we were both thinking the same thing but didn't want to admit it. "I think I'm going to talk to Toll about stuff," I offered. "Yeah," agreed Cam. "I think that would be a good idea. Can I be in on the discussion?" We agreed to meet early the next morning, and after saying a hasty goodbye, we headed to our homes. "Terringer," Shia called as I entered the house. "Are you okay?" The relief was obvious in her voice. "Yeah, I'm fine," I replied. "I was so worried about you," she said. "The fire in the village was terrifying. I could see the blaze all the way from here, and I didn't know where you were." "Well, Cam and I had just come back from Kofar when we saw the fire," I told her. We pitched in to help put it out. "Where's Toll?" "He's been up to Locksfield today," she answered. "He should be home any time now. He's going to be so concerned when he sees how close the fire came to the market." Toll was one of the main instigating forces to having the market set up in Corna. The obvious choice would have been Kofar, but he had done much to build up the market in our village, and it was by far the most popular place for the farmers in the whole region to bring their produce for sale. Toll would be relieved about the market, but the town's overall disaster would still bother him deeply. If anyone loved Corna, it was Toll. He had been born here, as had his father before him. I went into the back of the house where my room was. It wasn't much of a room, just enough space to hold a bed and a chest of drawers, but it was sufficient. I got out a sack and began to throw some things in it. I decided that I was going to take another look for that mysterious villain in the forest. I realized that I'd been planning this for a while, even though I didn't know it. I packed some clothes, along with my knife and a length of rope that I had under my bed. I intended to grab my tinder box, but for some reason I couldn't find it. My tinder box was a leather container holding flint, steel, and some tinder for starting fires. Toll had given it to me at the last Eventide festival, and it had a beautifully engraved golden T on it. Though I was slightly perplexed at not being able to find it, I knew that I could borrow one from Cam. With these things packed, I headed back to the front of the house to tell Shia that I was going to be heading out into the woods in the morning. I couldn't tell her exactly what I was doing. I didn't think she would take it very well if I told her that I was tracking a maniac killer who did horrific things to animals. I was working out what I would say as I walked into the room, only to find her in deep conversation. "Toll," I exclaimed, "you're back." "Taryn," Toll said, and looked at me with less excitement than I would have anticipated. He and Shia looked at each other and then back at me. No one said anything. "What's the matter?" I asked him. "Taryn, where were you this afternoon?" I was slightly taken aback by my father's question. "I was up at Kofar with Cam," I replied. "When did you leave?" "I'm not sure. It was probably just before noon." "Did anyone else see you leave?" "I don't think so. We didn't make a big exit." "I see," replied my father. "But it didn't look like he saw. Or at least I didn't know what he saw." "What's going on?" I asked tentatively. Toll exchanged another glance with Shia, then dropped his eyes to the floor. "I stopped in at the market when I got back to town," he began. "Fortunately, the fire didn't touch it, but there's still a lot of damage in the village. Many of the townsfolk were gathered at the market and were talking about the fire. Then Captain Fentic approached me and told me that they found something at the back of the livery where the fire started." "What did they find?" I asked. He replied with a question of his own. "Where is your tinder box?" At first the question didn't register, and then it felt like something hit me in the stomach. "I don't know, sir," I stammered. "I just went to get it and I couldn't find it in my room." "Taryn, if there's anything you want to tell me, now would be a good time." "What do you mean?" I asked. "They found a tinder box near where the fire started. It was yours." No, it couldn't be mine," I objected. "It had the gold T on it. I gave it to you. Do you think I wouldn't recognize it?" he asked. "But if it's mine, I don't know how it got there," I said. "Regardless, there are some very big questions being asked as to how the fire got started and who started it. And right now your name is high on everyone's lists." "You can't believe it was me," I pleaded, my eyes shifting between the two of them. Toll sighed. "No, of course I don't. It just doesn't look good." Suddenly there was a knock at the door and Camrack burst into the room. "Taryn, I think you're in big trouble," he panted. "You know about the tinderbox too?" I asked. Cam looked from Toll to Shia and then back at me. "I don't know anything about a tinderbox," he said, "but I heard a few of the men talking near the burnt-down blacksmith shop. Apparently they found a letter." "A letter?" I asked. "Saying what?" "I don't know all the details, but the bottom line is that someone claims that you were the reason the fire was started," he said. "What?" I asked. "That's impossible." "There's more," he said. "The letter also said there would be more fires if you didn't meet with the writer of the letter face to face." There was silence in the room. "Who wrote the letter?" I asked. "Someone named Tanjak." "Tanjak," Shia whispered. "It can't be." I had never heard the name before. It meant nothing to me, and yet this person wanted to meet with me? It made no sense. Toll sat down heavily in his chair. He looked at Camrack. "Are you sure that's the name?" he asked. "Yes," said Cam, "but who's Tanjak?" "You'd better sit down," Shia said. "We don't have much time, and we have much to say. Toll, start getting some food ready in a pack. I think Taryn is going to be leaving." I looked at her and then at Toll. "What's going on here?" "We knew this day would come," Shia started out, "but we always hoped that it would be tomorrow." "What day?" I asked. "Taryn, so much of what you know, of what you've come to accept as reality, is untrue." "What do you mean, untrue?" I asked with a sense of foreboding. Shia dug her fingers into her hair and rested her head on the palm of her hands. "Oh, where do I start?" she sighed. She looked up at Toll, who nodded at her once and gave her a small, resigned smile. "I know that you're going to have lots of questions, but I need to just talk and get it all out. Then you can ask your questions." I acquiesced with a simple nod. "Go ahead," I said. "I'm ready." No, you're not ready," she replied. "But then there's nothing to be done about it now. Taryn, your parents are not dead." I felt like I had fallen from a great height and hit the ground. I looked at Cam and saw the confusion mirrored in his eyes. It was suddenly hard to breathe. Maybe Shia was right. Maybe I wasn't ready. "Not dead?" I asked. "How? Where are they?" "I told you this would be hard. Please, just hear me out," she pleaded. She squeezed my hand, but I didn't squeeze back in return. I had no strength. "Let me start where it matters," she spoke softly, yet firmly. She was struggling with telling me almost as much as I was struggling in hearing. "Your mother and I are sisters. Toll and I have kept you safe for as long as we could, but it would appear that the time of our protection is at an end. There was a time long ago when things were much different than they are now. It was a time when giants and humans lived together. Giants and humans are alike in many ways, but in some ways they are drastically different. Humans have always had an inclination towards goodness, while giants towards evil. That's not to say there are no good giants. There are good giants just as there are evil people, but mostly they are cruel and heartless. The giants oppressed the humans. They served as slaves and were treated with harsh injustice. Now there arose among the giants a leader named Korath. He persuaded the giants to exterminate the humans once and for all. He manipulated the spark of their natural evil and fanned it into a flame of hatred. It looked like the time of the humans was over. And it would have been except for a giant named Dek. He was not swayed by Korath's venomous words, for he had loved and married a human woman named Tia. Their marriage was a secret, for it was not accepted that humans and giants should marry. They had one child, a boy named Khan, who was his father's pride and joy, and Tia was pregnant with their second child. To protect his wife and child, Dek had to stop the violent genocide against the human race, and the only way to do that was to once and for all separate the giants from the humans. Dek was aware of an old wizard who lived in the forest. Whether this wizard was human or giant, it was not known, but Dek and Tia sought him out nonetheless. After 3 days of searching, they found him living in a cave. They made Khan wait outside the cave, hidden in a grove of trees, while they went in to speak with the wizard. Khan, afraid of being left alone, climbed one of the trees for safety. The wizard was very powerful. He knew of an incantation that would open a portal to another land, a land in the clouds where the giants could be sent. "Are you with me so far?" Shai asked. I think so," I replied. "Korath wants to get rid of the human race. Dek wants to find a way to save it, so he locates a wizard that can send the giants to another country." "Not just another country, an entirely different world." She saw the look of wonder and confusion on my face, but pressed on anyway. "No giant would be able to enter the land of the humans again, and no human would be able to enter the land of the giants." At this, Dek and Tia wept, because they loved each other deeply, and the thought of forever being separated was too much. The wizard saw their deep affection, and was moved to compassion. He spoke of another portal, a portal into an in-between place. This place, which the wizard called the Threshold, could be reached from both the land of the humans and the land of the giants. However, neither human nor giant could spend more than 3 days in the Threshold. "While it is impossible for me to open this portal," the wizard warned them, "the cost is tremendously high. For it is written that in order for this to occur, a spear must pierce the heart of the beseecher." Dek looked at Tia. His desire for her safety and that of his family overcame his sense of self-preservation. "Do it," he told the wizard. Looking at Tia, he said, "We will find each other there." The wizard crouched down and began to moan softly. As the pressure of his concentration grew, so did the volume of his moaning, until he was almost yelling. Dek and Tia held hands and exchanged worried glances. All of a sudden the wizard went deathly silent. There was a small pause, no longer than a heartbeat, and then a terrific roar filled the air, followed by a violent shaking of the earth. In an instant, every giant that walked on the face of the earth vanished, spirited away to the land in the clouds, including Dek. Although Tia knew this was going to happen, she felt her heart miss a beat and a deep longing settled in her soul. To find comfort in her moment of grief, she called out to her son, Khan, but heard no response. She called again and again, heard nothing. Fearing that he was somehow taken also, she rushed from the cave to where Khan had been left. There he lay, sprawled on the ground. He had fallen from the tree during the earthquake and landed on a sharpened branch. His heart was punctured, and he died instantly. Suddenly, Tia was all alone. She had lost both her husband and her son in a single moment. In great distress, she buried her precious son, and then she simply left, walking aimlessly for 40 days and nights, hardly eating or drinking. The wizard finally found her and brought her back to his cave to care for her. She was close to death. No matter what the wizard did, he could not bring her back to health. She had lost her will to live. The time came for her baby to be born, and she gave birth to a daughter. She was so weak that it took the last vestige of life that she had. With her final breath, she whispered a name, Desan, which meant despair. and then she died. The wizard buried Tia next to her son Con with great care. His sadness was immense, for he knew that the schism of humans and giants couldn't last forever, and that a day would come when giants would again threaten the human race. Over her grave he spoke this prophecy: "The day of oppression will come, the barrier of aggression undone. Yet the roar of the giants will fade into silence when the one that was two becomes one." There was silence in the house. Shia seemed to have finished her tale. Cam was standing at the window. He had moved there sometime during the account, though I couldn't recall when. I was too absorbed in the story. "What does this have to do with me?" I asked hesitantly. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because Desan is your great-great-grandmother," she replied. "There is a trace of giant's blood in you, as there is in me and in your mother. It is this trace that kept your mother looking for the threshold her whole life. Everyone thought she was crazy. And then, one day, she found it." "The threshold?" Cam asked incredulously. "She found the threshold?" "Yes," Shia said, "in the mist." Cam and I shared a quick glance. Toll caught the exchange. "You've seen it, haven't you?" he asked. "You've seen the mist." We told them about all that had happened the week before. "Are you saying this Tanjak has something to do with the mist?" I asked. "Your mother wasn't the only one to find the threshold," Shia continued. "As chance or fate would have it, there was a giant who had been searching his whole life as well. He was the son of the king of the giants. He had heard of the legend of the threshold and was greatly intrigued. He stumbled upon the portal between the land of the giants and the threshold almost the same time as your mother did. They met in that mysterious place in between the two lands, and they fell in love. Your mother became pregnant and gave birth to you in the threshold, to you and your twin brother." "Brother?" I asked. My head was swimming. It felt like I could hold no more information, and yet I craved to hear it all. "Yes," she continued, "and you need to know there has never been an instance of giant twins before. You and your brother were the first. And although you shared your mother's womb, you were as different as night and day when you were born. Your brother was larger than you and more aggressive, and your mother feared for your life. Even by the age of 1, it was clear that you had a strong bent towards gentleness, while your brother had a strong bent towards violence. To protect you, your mother brought you here to Toll and I, until you could take care of yourself. Being part human and part giant, she was able to stay in the threshold indefinitely. She kept your brother ignorant about the portal, and thus kept him away from you." "Is Tanjak my brother?" "Yes." "But how did he find the portal?" I asked. "I don't know," Shia said. "There is much that concerns me greatly. Something must have happened to your mother, and because Tanjak is involved, I fear the worst." "I don't understand," I said. "Why the dead fox in the forest, and the fires, and the note? Why not just come to me?" "For some reason he wants you to go into the threshold," Shia replied. "No one can be forced. You must be willing to go." Again silence reigned in the house. There was so much to comprehend that it seemed to be beyond me. Whatever answers I was looking for were far off. On one hand, I had an evil brother who was not afraid to cause harm to whomever he came across. I should avoid him at all costs. And yet, on the other hand, my real mother was out there and possibly in distress because of my brother. It was that second thought that decided it for me. There was nothing else I could do. I had to go if I could save my mother. Suddenly, Cam broke the silence. "Uh-oh, we've got trouble." The rest of us sprang to the window. A crowd was approaching the house, led by the blacksmith Brobor. They held torches in their hands, along with clubs, spears, and swords, and the looks on their faces were not ones of peace.